Hi, this is Jacob with MyUntangled Media. Today we are going to talk very quickly about responsive web design. What is responsive web design? So here we are on Wikipedia, where they go through a sort of long-winded description about it being an approach to web design, often referred to as RWD. Aimed at crafting sites to provide optimal viewing experience across a wide range of devices, from desktop computer monitors to mobile phones. And, it obviously goes on and talks about the main points, which are fluid grid concept, flexible images, and media queries. And that is pretty much what responsive web design is, but what really is responsive web design? What does that really mean to the average person? So let's just look at it. Let's look at the first one, the fluid grid concept. So most responsive web design is based on a fluid grid. All the sites that we build are based on Bootstrap, which is a fluid grid system, and we're looking at the Bootstrap grid system website right now. And this is actually a slightly older version, but it shows a really good example of the fluid grid. So all websites that are based on this grid system are in a 12-column system. So things are laid out in 12 columns. So you can lay things out on websites in any number of ways, but the way that you sort of keep things looking really neat and wonderful and awesome and gorgeous is to lay them out in this grid system. And so here you see 12 single columns. Here you see a few different versions of ways that you can stack different columns. And what happens is when you shrink these columns, and I'm mimicking if I were taking my browser window and just making it smaller, putting my mouse in the corner and just making it smaller, you see my columns and my rows and everything here is responding until it does this thing where it explodes here. All right? So what is that really doing? Okay, so that's really the crux of what this responsive grid system is about. The grids are going to stack the way they are, and then at a certain point, in fact, exactly at 767 pixels, the columns will become fluid and stack vertically. So you see you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 9. Once it hits 767 or less, they're going to stack on top of each other. 1, 2, 4, 4, 5, 9. So, okay, so you're saying, all right, but what does that really mean? Okay. Let's look at it in an actual design. Here on the MyUntangled Media website, we have 4 columns laid out here. So these are all 3, evened out. So 4 times 3 is 12. And so if I were to show you sort of how to mimic here, I'm going to go in... So what am I in? I'm in Firefox. I want to show you a trick to mimic responsive web design and see how things look in Firefox. So if you click over your little Firefox thingy-majiggy here, and you click on Developer, and you go to Responsive Design View, you will see you get just that. And what it does is it's going to give you the view that I was showing you when we were looking at Bootstrap, which allows you to kind of manipulate your browser and take a look at what the different actual pixel dimensions are. Okay, and there are some preset pixel dimensions. So for instance, if I want to, so these things that we laid out here on this grid, if I want to see how they look on a phone that's 360 pixels, which is probably quite a few phones out there, I can see that it stacks exactly like the Bootstrap grid that we just looked at. But if it's on a larger device or an even larger device, so like 1280, like your basic sort of laptop or monitor, it goes back out into its 4 different columns. Okay, and so and we know from looking at this that these things stack from left to right. So when we're designing websites, we want to keep in mind, how do we want things to stack? And how are things going to interact with one another? The other thing that we can do is we can hide elements. So in this example, for instance, this is a funky, awesome looking, newfangled thingy-majiggy here, but it doesn't really look so good on smaller things. So at a certain point, if I keep going, you'll see it disappears completely. And this actually becomes a lot smaller, and this menu pops up as opposed to the regular menu. So this is another part of Bootstrap, this menu system. The other thing that happens down here is all of these things become centered. And that's all because of media queries. And that's the other part of this part we were talking about. All right. So these all things are working together. So really, what does that mean? Okay, so let's look at the back end of a website here. So this is the MyUntangled Media website. So see at max with 767. So anything before that, what I'm telling the website to do in order to be responsive and respond to different devices is do a couple different things. Like for instance, this right here is what hides that crazy slideshow thingy-majiggy testimonial section. And, this right here is, this is a CSS class that I set up to align everything center. And this right here says don't display this fancy thingamajig up here that streams recent posts from our blog. So I'm saying display none. I've got the div ID for that, and I'm saying don't display it after anything under 767 pixels. Don't display it. So here I am at 1023 pixels, and then you'll see here I am. I'll go to 768. There it is, and at 767 it's gone. So that's how that works, the hiding. And at 767 these become centered, and a whole bunch of other things happen. So that's this part of it, the media queries part. And, in use, this can happen in conjunction with one another. So for instance, on this page, which is another website that I built, if I go into Chrome, so I'm in Chrome now, and I want to show you a trick of how to test responsive views in Chrome the same way we've been doing. And then you're almost on your own here. If I go to Chrome, my little thingamajiggy thing, it's very technical. Developer tools. You'll see that I have a mobile view that pops up right here, and it starts to, this looks a little bit different than the one in Firefox and is a little bit more comprehensive and kind of awesome. But this one lets me pick different devices to simulate. So when we're designing websites, we want to test them and see, how they're going to look in different devices, because that's how you're going to get your optimum experience for everybody. Try to get your most conversions, your most customers, your most readers, whatever it is that you're trying to do to get people to stick around. So for instance, in this particular website, like we've got this process that we laid out, which looks pretty groovy, and it goes left to right. But, you can imagine, so these are laid out in the grid, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's some centering and things that go along to make it work. But they're going to stack on top of each other in a weird way with these arrows pointing to the right. So what we do is we can simulate here, like for instance, so let's see what this looks like on an iPhone. If I go, let's say iPhone 5. And a lot of times you have to then reload in order to get, the simulation to sort of re-register. So after I reload, you'll see this, everything gets stacked. So at this iPhone width at 320 by 568, everything gets stacked. This mobile menu comes up here, much like the other one. This gets smaller, and you'll see These do get stacked on top of one another, like we learned right at the beginning, if you're still with us. But the little arrows disappear, except for one little arrow, just to kind of keep people moving along. And these all center, and it looks pretty groovy, in my opinion. But as you go back, if I pull it out, you'll see these arrows pop back up, and everything kind of goes back into this grid system. So that's a way that you can use the media queries to hide things, and take your stacking elements of Bootstrap and use them in conjunction with one another to give folks on all different devices a really good mobile experience. And one other thing I'll show you here, another tip is, how responsive is your website? If you don't want to go through any of these developer tool thingamajigs and you just want to test stuff, which I use a lot, responsivedesignchecker.com. There's a lot of sites like these, but I think this one's really great. You come in here and you enter your URL. So I'm going to enter MyUntangledLife.com. So I've been doing a lot of work on this site recently to try to really customize its responsiveness through the use of media queries and things of that nature. And so one of the ways that it's really easy for me to get a really, really quick snapshot of where we're at is to go to this website, type in any URL, and check it out. So on this particular website, this looks pretty good. On an iPad landscape, it's saying, things look pretty groovy. How's it look on an iPhone? Looks pretty groovy. Things get centered. This is a little big here. I might want to deal with that. I can check and see if the menus work. That looks pretty good. So these things sort of get centered here. When it blows up to a huge screen, that looks okay. Et cetera, et cetera. So, this is a really great way to test your different websites as well, and make sure that things are looking the way you want them to look. And you can click on things. You can. There happens to be a really good looking dog here. These things are all set to center. Looking at this, I think maybe I'd make these text things a little smaller. But basically that's how you tweak it. And if I go back to this original page that I was on Bootstrap, you'll see that there are some default media queries. So these sort of correspond to all the devices that are out there. And there are some default CSS classes that you can add that will have things, visible or not visible as a way to sort of shortcut a lot of this. And this will be ever evolving as new devices come out and web design changes. But I do believe for the near future, responsive is kind of the way to go. And I look forward to your responses. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us at MyUntangled Media. And thanks so much.